Okay, go ahead.
All right. Well, is there somebody available to record the meeting and able to host? Okay, we got that taken care of. Perfect. Okay. This is a community meeting, Kubernetes community meeting on June 21st, 2018. It'll be posted publicly on YouTube, so please be mindful of what you say is being recorded. Even what you eat, even your munches and your clothes are all recorded, so please be mindful of that. My name is Arun Gupta. I work for Amazon. I work in the open source team here, and I work very closely with the Amazon EKS team over here. So please be mindful. Well, I also work closely in the SIG AWS. That's where sort of I've been spending most of my time. So anything around Kubernetes and AWS, I'm happy to help you out. For everybody else, if you're not speaking, please stay muted. It's a simple button on the bottom left corner of your Zoom console. So with that, we'll get started. So for today, we have a demo on Agonis, which is a dedicated game server hosting and scaling for multiplayer games on Kubernetes. Mark, are you ready? Mark, you are muted. And we had Mark until a few minutes ago. Well, he was sharing his screen. So
let's just move on to release updates, and then we can come back.
Okay, so I guess we'll come back to the demo later. Let's go to the release updates in that case. So for 1.11, Josh Burkus is the release lead. Josh, are you ready?
Howdy. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. We've gone from everything being green in the last week to everything being not so green right now. Let's go over what just happened. So what happened this week was we code thawed on Tuesday, lifting code freeze. The pending submit queues from non-111 features should now be cleared. At this point, so if your stuff is still in queue, it's for some other reason. We cut RC1 yesterday, so please test. People can install that using kubeadmin if you want to go ahead and test that. Unfortunately, given the number of issues that have cropped up this week, release status is currently uncertain. I give it about a 50-50 chance that we're going to call for a delay. We'll make a final decision at the burn down meeting 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. The main issues are CI signal issues. One is it appears that the GKE platform pushed a change on Wednesday that breaks several tests, unrelated to our code, but of course, when the tests break, then we have to make sure that nothing that they were supposed to test is broken. The upgrade tests are still very flaky. These tests primarily how GCE and GKE upgrade Kubernetes, as opposed to things like kubeadmin upgrade. We've conversed with that GCE and GKE team, and they've given us the go-ahead to release even without those tests being clean, because they said that they don't plan to fix the tests. And then we've also got alpha tests failing because of a daemon set issue that has happened off and on since 1.10 cycle. And we're currently experimenting with adjusting some resource thresholds. However, any of those issues and a couple of other recent things that have come up with, say, core DNS could prove to be more pernicious than expected. And if so, we will be scheduling a release delay. And again, look for an announcement from me tomorrow on a potential release delay. The other fun, happy thing is that the release notes collector, that is the piece of code that goes through and harvests release notes from all of the PRs, broke about 2 weeks ago, something like that, 2.5 weeks ago. We have not. It actually turns out has always had a problem with missing some release notes, and for some reason, the 111 cycle, that problem is worse. We still don't know what's causing it. So I'm asking anybody who did commit something in 111 that required a release note, please double check that that is represented in the current draft release notes. And if you do find something that's missing, contact Nick Chase to have it added. Based on doing some sampling, we estimate that there are probably still somewhere around 24 release notes that we ought to have in the release notes and are not there. And that is all the fun from 111 release land. So more news tomorrow about whether or not we're actually releasing on June 26th.
Thank you, Josh. This is very helpful. Any questions for Josh? Okay, we'll move on then in that case. 112, Tim Pepper, are you on the line?
Yep, nothing much to say other than I've just gotten and about to make a PR on the last role for the release team there, and then we're having some discussions around the schedule specifics and the timeline, but of course that depends on 111, because if 111 slips, we'll probably be conservative and let it push into sort of mid-July, because the 4th of July week is problematic. So a 2-week slip there becomes something that has implications on the 112 schedule, but we'll cross that bridge over the next week or two.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that update. Let's move on to the patch release updates. Anybody have updates on 1.8.14? I saw the release notes went out. Okay. I saw 1.9.9 release schedule went out as well. I think that was a couple of days ago. Any updates on that? Okay. And then I saw 1.10.5 going out this morning. So it's quite a good release cadence. If you think about it, 1.8, 1.9, 1.10, 1.11, we're churning out quite actively. That's pretty cool. Okay. Well, so that's all the updates on the release. Mark, are you back?
I am back. Xfinity literally had an outage in my area 2 seconds before the meeting was meant to start, so I'm tethered on my phone. So we'll definitely do our best. It should in theory work.
No worries. It happens to the best of us. All right. So Mark, you are talking about Agonis. Take it away. You got 10 minutes.
Sweet. Starting my timer. All right. Let's hit screen share. Where are we? Present and screen share desktop 2. Start it. Excellent. And what just happened? Can you see my screen?
It's all blank.
Yeah, that's what I have too. Oh my God. This is clearly my day. I'm going to rejoin the meeting. Looks like today is going to be my day. Bear with me one sec.
I see your video icon on the top, but the screen is all black. Do you want to maybe talk through this to begin with while we figure out the screen setup in the meanwhile? Oh, we lost him again.
He was restarting Zoom to see if it would fix it.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we'll come back to Mark one more time. Let's see what's next in the agenda. So if I go here, KEP of the week. So for those who don't know, there's a kubernetes.io/docs/imported/community/keps. That's where they talk about KEP. So I just want to quickly read, what is the purpose of the KEP process? And I think it very clearly summarizes it. So it says, the purpose of the KEP process, which is basically Kubernetes enhancement process, is to reduce the amount of tribal knowledge in our community by moving decisions from a smattering of mailing lists, video calls, and hallway conversations into a well-tracked artifact. This process aims to enhance communication and discoverability. And it's all the more relevant, particularly given how widely distributed the Kubernetes community is. So that's essentially what a KEP is. Yusui, are you there to talk about the KEP of the week?
Hey, so I'm going to talk about the KEP namespace population. Let me share the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the namespace population is a proposal which was originally part of the secure profile proposal, and people think this is very generic and can be useful. So that comes this standalone proposal for the namespace population. Actually, there's a lot of details and complications behind that. So depending on the limit time, I'm starting from the high level. If I have time, I can drip down a bit. So first, the problem the namespace population going to solve is it tried to provide a mechanism that people can, especially in a multi-tenancy environment, people can use purely on a Kubernetes API and client tools to create a namespace while the class admin is still able to automatically populate the policy object into newly created namespaces without asking the creator to do additional work to create these policy objects. And these objects can be automatically enforced and changed and updated after, even for namespace already created. When the class admin going to change the policy, they are automatically populated into all the existing namespaces. So behind this idea, there's a few challenges. So the first thing is when a user want to create a namespace, we need to make sure during the creation of namespace, there's no other users or even the creator has a privilege to do something else, like to create pods before all the policy objects are populated. So this is the first problem about the security. So we are thinking about using a few mechanisms to prevent that. So the first thing, we need to rely on the RBAC system. So we are needed to first create RBAC rules to only grant the permission for the user to only create a namespace. And let me go down a little. So here, so make it in a secure way. So first, we only grant the create permission to the user, and once the namespace is being created, the mechanism will introduce another CRD called namespace template, which define a list of policy objects to be created into the namespace. And the last object will be a role binding, which grant the user additional permissions in the namespace. So once the namespace is fully populated, then the user is able to move forward to create additional objects or create pods inside the namespace, while the other policy objects are already created, like the network policy or the role bindings for default service count to use a post secure policy. So everything becomes secure at that moment. So this is the basic idea behind this mechanism. So under hood, there's actually two components involved. So the first component is a mutating admission webhook, and the other is the namespace template controller. So the most logic is performed inside the controller. The controller is watching the namespace template, the CRDs, and also the creation of namespace spaces. When a new namespace is created, the controller will try to match find out all the namespace template that is going to be applied on the namespace, and then it basically figure out all the policy objects to be created, and concate them into a full manifest and use kubectl to create them into the namespace. There's one big problem during that process is when the controller gets a notification about the newly created namespace, it has no idea about who created namespace, and that causes trouble to grant the final permission to the creator. So that part is basically solved by the mutating admission webhook. when it creates namespace, the webhook will annotate the namespace with username of the creator. Then the controller will be able to substitute the resource template to create the role binding. And the last step is about the initialization. So to be compatible with existing clients and client programs and scripts, when a namespace is being created, we don't want the API call, the create a namespace API call to return before the namespace is fully initialized. So we are utilizing the initializer mechanism to put the name, a controller name into the metadata.initializers pending list. And basically the API server will hold on the request for a while until the controller fully initializes the namespace. So this initializer is also added by the mutating admission webhook. And so the behavior the user will observe is when they create namespace, the command line will hold until all the policy objects are created, and then the user is able to get a fully populated namespace object. There's other thoughts behind this mechanism, like the extending initializers. So currently the mutating webhook only put the namespace template controller as initializer, and it can be extended to support additional initializer for the namespace. The mechanism is quite similar to the existing initializers admission controller, but which is going to be obsoleted. So the proposal is basically learning from this mechanism, but proposing a more specific namespace initialization mechanism. And going back to the namespace template, this is a proposed CRD format, which use a simple list of, let me go back to the sample. Simple list of, wait a second, where's, a list of templates, and the template is basically inline all the objects to be created. This is a very simple proposal, and there's a few limitations, like the total size.
You have 1 more minute to wrap this up.
Okay, so so there's a few limits on the template, and we can see in future we can think about additional mechanism, like to extend the source of template definition from other places. Like for example, a template, a real namespace with all the policy objects, but this is out of scope of this proposal. So I think I have demonstrated all the idea behind this proposal. And if you have any questions or have any comments, please feel free to go to this KEP PR and put comments there. So the PR number. The KEP is the namespace population with PR number 2177. So that's all.
And this is already listed in the show notes, so the release notes. So thank you so much. Now, for people who don't know, you can always go back to the meeting notes over there. And one of the things I wanted to kind of quickly highlight, if in about 30 seconds, is if I can share my screen here is. So let me try it again. I'm going to share my desktop here. There is a KEP tracking board. Now, this is on the looking at the meeting topics here. So if you go here and you look at the KEP tracking here, this is a GitHub project, essentially part of Kubernetes community. And this is a nice Trello board. So in case you want to look at what is sort of the status for different KEPs, you can easily track them. So this is definitely worth a look. All right, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to give Mark a third chance. Hopefully, third time is a charm, and he'll be able to do the show, and Xfinity will cooperate as well. Mark, are you there?
Let's give this a shot. All right, so it's sharing screen.
Okay.
The problem right now, so let's see if that happens.
Mark, you're sounding a little faint.
Oh, that's not because, and I'm still getting a black screen. I apologize. Every time I hit share screen, it just gives me a black screen and I don't see anything.
Well, we did try earlier before the show, and it worked very well, though.
I don't know what to suggest. I can reboot and come back, but if you want to bump me, I also totally understand.
So, well, what we'll do is we'll go on with the show for now. Why don't you try to reboot? We'll give it one last shot, and then kind of put you at the end of the queue again. Then
appreciate your consideration. All right, I'll be back.
Absolutely, no problem. So the next topic in the agenda, then we're going to go to SIG updates essentially. So for the 3 SIGs that we're covering is SIG Big Data. That's the first one. Sean, are you on the line?
I am here.
Okay, take it away.
Let's see if I can share my screen. This is the kiss of death for presenters today, so we'll see. Are you able to see that?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. How about that? Right, so I'm going to give a very quick update about the status of the SIG Big Data's work. Topics I'm going to cover are Spark, which has been the bulk of work, Airflow, which is a workload scheduler and runner that's very popular, and HDFS running on Kubernetes, which is needed to complete the story, and then a couple final thoughts. So main status, one of the big efforts was to get Apache Spark working natively on Kubernetes. This makes Apache Spark able to have 3 different scheduler backends. So it had Mesos originally, Yarn, and now it has Kubernetes as the 3rd major backend scheduler. This was incubated for over a year in a side fork repo, and then in Spark 2.3, it was merged into the main Spark repo, and is one of the marquee features of the Spark 2.3 release. So this was very exciting for everyone involved, and it was quite a multi-organization effort between Google, Pepperdata, my former company, Palantir, Bloomberg, a bunch of different organizations, and several places are running this in production. Anirudh and I gave a talk on this at the Spark Summit a couple weeks ago, and it was a gigantic packed room talk. There were well over 500 people in attendance, and they were kicking people out the door for fire marshal reasons. So this is a very popular new possibility of the way to run Spark. Quick look at what already released in Spark 2.3, kind of the basics: cluster mode, SQL, a bunch of modes of using Spark are already released. In particular, and also the ways to build Spark containers, because this is the only mode of Spark in which it's very common, or in fact required, that you use Spark packaged in a container. So there was new tooling added to Spark to do that. Spark 2.4, the stuff that's getting worked on right now. PySpark is a frequently asked, very frequently demanded feature. So that's getting worked on. Spark has a mode called dynamic allocation, which allows it to scale up and down its executors based on the workload. There's some features to ease the running of notebooks, although it's already possible to run Spark in notebooks very well. We're going to publish official container images of Spark. So this is a new thing. The Apache Software Foundation does not regularly publish official container images. It's up to the user to build their own, but we're going to be publishing official images, and we're also going to be adding R support into this Spark, just like Python support. Okay. Going to talk a little bit, one slide on Airflow. So Airflow is a workload scheduler, not a scheduler in the same sense as the Kubernetes scheduler. It's a thing like, I want to run this repeated workload, which has these 17 steps and parallelism of these methods every day. The on Kubernetes support, of course, works with containers and with Kubernetes Kubernetes operations. 2 new things are the Kubernetes executor. Airflow has executors to run its tasks. Usually, previously people would run executors on standalone hosts, and in this, using the Kubernetes executor, the executor runs in a pod. Also, the Kubernetes operator, which is kind of the converse of that, it means that you can have an Airflow step which says, I want to run this Kubernetes pod, right? So it's not an executor running in a pod, it's the actual action is run that pod. This work is currently in a release candidate for the next version of Airflow, so it should be released soon. And then it'll be in kind of a similar state as the Spark work, in that there's an actual official image. Last project is HDFS. So HDFS, there's in a development repo, there's a Helm chart, which will give you a fully installed HDFS setup on a Kubernetes system. I should mention that the Spark, one of the purposes of having HDFS is so that you can store persistent, big distributed data on Kubernetes. The Spark work, of course, works with this or would work off of other sources of data like, cloud storage systems or external HDFS systems or anything you've got. For the on Kubernetes HDFS work, it does have the very important in some networking setups locality optimization, fully works with the Spark code. There is HA name node support, and I think that's automatically set up with the Helm charts. Also Kerberos support, which is the very common security methodology used for HDFS. This is not yet in any kind of release candidate. It's hopefully going to be an alpha release, maybe this month, maybe next. Last thoughts. One big need, which is getting worked on in mainly the core SIG scheduling for Kubernetes, is to get parity with Spark on Yarn. The main thing here is, as I mentioned, scheduling. Yarn has all kinds of fancy features dealing with multi-tenant and scheduling related things. And that I talked to several organizations after the Spark Summit who, are like telcos and banks who are serious users of big data. And they are interested in switching some or major parts of their setup from using Yarn to Kubernetes, which is a really big deal. But the scheduling sophistication is a key blocker for them. So it's good that this is getting worked on. The other thing that'll be really neat is once we have that official Airflow release with the Spark, this will make it extremely compelling demo for this whole technology, because Airflow is a very popular thing, and you can make real setups that use the combination of Airflow and Spark. That's it.
Thank you, Stephen. Sean, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
There is a question for you in the chat window. One of them has already been answered.
Chat window.
So
hold on, I'm trying to find it. Chat. There you go.
The next SIG is the PM SIG. Stephen Augustus, are you on the call?
I am on the call. Can you hear me okay?
A little faint.
How about now?
Much better. Thank you. So let's talk about SIG PM.
Sure. Can you enable my screen? Don't mind.
Sean, if you can disable your screen, because only one person can share at a given point of time.
How do I do that?
You should be able to
stop
sharing.
I'm looking for a stop sharing button. Oh, there it is. It's
top right. Yeah.
It's a different control. There you go.
Yeah. Okay, Stephen, you should be able to share the screen now.
All right. I am apparently also having screen sharing issues. Sorry about that. Let me pop in and pop back out.
Well, so Stephen was also providing the update for not just SIG PM, but also SIG Azure. And today seems to be like the screen sharing day. Funny. Anyway, so before Stephen comes back, let's see. Is Mark back on the call?
I'm
Mark
here.
is. Oh, cool.
Here.
Okay. So let's give it a last try, see if we can get you up and running.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Rebooted. What? Okay.
Oh,
no.
It flashed for a second, then it came back to the black screen.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Do you want to not go into the full presentation mode? Maybe just keep it in a non-presentation mode and then advance your slides that way?
Sure. I can't even.
Exactly. We found the full screen.
Ooh,
Yeah.
what's that? Can you
There
see
you go.
that?
So you know what? Just advance the screens like this. There's no animation, but at least we can see the slides.
Okay. Or if I click present now, can you see it
I
now?
think there you go. I can see it now. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know what I did, but magically it worked.
Yay.
Technology.
So Mark, you
All right.
have about 10 minutes to do the entire demo.
Awesome. Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Mandel. I'm tethering on my phone, so this should be hilarious. I'm a developer advocate for Google Cloud, and I'm here to talk to you about Agones, which is a scaling multiplayer dedicated game servers on top of Kubernetes. So I want to talk about a very particular type of game. So the type of game I'm talking about is sort of your online, fast-paced, sort of your FPS, your MMOs. So you're thinking your Overwatch, your Unreal tournaments, those sort of games. These sort of games are very high-paced, and latency here is a really big deal. 10 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds, either way is a big problem. So what I want to do here today is actually use a little open source FPS shooter called Sonotic to use as a demo today. You can go grab it on sonotic.org. If you've ever played Unreal Tournament, that's sort of the game that is in here, and it has all the good stuff like deathmatch and capture the flag and all that kind of stuff. But when we talk about these sort of fast-paced multiplayer games, one of the most prevalent ways of hosting and running these is what's commonly referred to as a dedicated game server. So I just want to set some like base knowledge so we all understand the same things. So a dedicated game server is actually a full in-memory simulation of the game that runs somewhere in the cloud, and all of the players then connect to that dedicated game server. Usually then they send in sort of things like, hey, I want to like run forward or fire my rockets or like throw this ball. And they send that input up to the dedicated game server, and the game server then determines what is the actual true state of what's going on, and then basically sends down to the rest, hey, this is actually what happened inside this game. There's two very good reasons for doing this, one of which we're talking about latency. So being able to control the geographic location of where these dedicated game servers sit is very important, because the closer it is physically, the less latency you will have. The other fun thing is that people are horrible. And if you run these dedicated game servers on your own network, they're much harder to hack, and it's much harder to cheat at these sort of games. There are other ways of doing it, but dedicated game servers are definitely becoming the fore. So traditional architecture for something like this, just to set the stage, you might have a couple of players. Those couple of players will usually connect to some kind of matchmaker that will probably put them together based on some sort of skill level or something similar. Once the matchmaker has a group of people, it's going to talk to some kind of game server manager. And that game server manager usually then talks to a cluster of machines, and it's going to say, okay, cool, I need a dedicated game server process, so that simulation server, running somewhere on this cluster of machines. And generally it'll grab an IP import from that process that is started. And so it gets a free IP, passes the IP import for that dedicated game server back up to those players. And those players will make a direct connection to those processes, right? This is in-memory simulation. So you want to have them all on the same machine so it can process that in memory for speed. And also load balancers add latency, so that's bad too. So we do direct connections, and that becomes very important here as well. So Agones is really this part here. It's the hosting and scaling of dedicated game servers and treating them in a way that makes sense for dedicated game servers, because they do have in-memory state that is, but they come up in unordered ways. So stateful sets and pods don't really work for either of these workloads. So Agones, it's designed to be a batteries included open source dedicated game server hosting and scaling project. Currently in alpha, we are heading towards 0.3 right now. Been working on this in conjunction with Ubisoft since about November last year. We co-founded it, I guess, in some ways. And they've been really, really great. They've got a huge history of running large-scale dedicated game server workloads and big multiplayer games. So it's been really fun working with them. I do want to talk a little bit about why Kubernetes and why Kubernetes is so important. I mean, Kubernetes is kind of amazing. We are essentially an operator. We have custom resource definitions and controllers, and we do extend Kubernetes, and that's been hugely, hugely beneficial to enable us to move really quickly with this. It's been kind of amazing the amount of stuff we've been able to get done. But the other thing is the abstraction layer that Kubernetes gets. For games, latency is key. So being able to put servers in very particular places around the world and having a lot of control and flexibility for that is paramount for these types of games. So maybe you want to run on the cloud, you want to run on your own dedicated game servers, or maybe you just want to put it in some random place in the middle of Europe somewhere or something that just isn't covered by regular people. Kubernetes, the abstraction Kubernetes gives you is great. And also gaming teams are loving the fact they can run their other processes on here too. And it's just one platform they need to manage. So that's pretty awesome. Sweet. So as I said, Agones is an extension. We have CRDs. Possibly unsurprisingly, we have a game server. This is our standard unit for inside Agones. So you're able to define a game server inside Kubernetes as a CRD. We can give it a name as we would do normally. We have a port policy. As we mentioned before, we're doing direct connections. So Agones will actually manage which ports on those nodes that you have set up within a range and make sure they're available, and basically then allocate ports to those. We're actually doing host ports behind the scenes for interest's sake, so we can actually do that through. And then the game server itself, it's just a container, nothing more special than that. We do have an SDK that we build in, but at the end of the day, it's really just a container. And we actually allow a full pod spec within our game server, so anything you can do in a pod, you can do here as well. Much like pods and say deployments, as you would say in Kubernetes parlance or standard Kubernetes parlance, game server is kind of like our pod. This is our base building block inside Agones. So whereas you would use, say, a deployment inside Kubernetes, here we actually use what we call a fleet, which is essentially a large group of warm game servers that are basically sitting there waiting to be played on and players to connect to and play. So a fleet, much like a deployment, is a game server template, but with a set of replicas that we can then scale up and down. So you can see that here, replicas 2, and we have a game server set just down here, a game server template here, I should say. And that works pretty much like a deployment. But you may have realized, right, we don't do load balancers. So we need a way to be able to say, hey, give me a game server out of that pool of that fleet and make sure that we know that those players are playing on it. So unsurprisingly, we have another CRD. We have what's called a fleet allocation. In actuality, you would probably do this through the Kubernetes API, but you can say fleet allocation, give me back a fleet, and it will give you back a game server straight out of that fleet that is then moved to an allocated state. We'll have a look at that. That's actually really, really important. We're just going to skip that for time reasons. Beautiful. Go to the demo slide. Beautiful. Come on. Oh, no, I don't have. Come on, give me. All right, fine. I'll do it here instead. Oops. I've gone to a dead screen. Now I can't see anything. Of course, this fails. Can I do that? Nope.
I'm still seeing a black screen.
Yeah, my demo just decided it wasn't going to play nice. Wow. All right, well, then I'll talk through this just real quickly. I can't even exit it, so that's fun. That's unfortunate, but okay. So what happens when you allocate a game server out of Fleet is it moves to an allocated state. This is important because if you have players that are playing a game, and you cannot shut down that game server, right? That's really bad. They get mad if you arbitrarily shut down your things. So we need a state that basically says, hey, this is important. So if you move a game server to allocated, if you change the size of that fleet, or you possibly push out a new version doing a rolling update inside fleets, then it'll actually stay untouched. It'll wait for that game server to shut down, which is like an application specific thing. And it'll shut that down only when that game has actually finished, which is really important. I don't even know how I can turn off sharing at this point. All right, cool. What was I also going to say? So that's kind of, I can't show the demo, unfortunately. I've got a GKE cluster set up. It's all running. It's all perfect. We were going to set up so Synodic and connect to it, but you'd see a game on there, which would be great. If you want to learn more about Agones and potentially see a demo, I've got a bunch of YouTube videos up on my YouTube account. But we're actively looking for contributors. So anyone who has experience with game server scaling, which is totally cool if you don't, especially if anyone has experience with end-to-end testing. We have a full test suite using like fake packages, but we definitely need some more end-to-end testing. And we're looking to expand out into doing stuff with statistic collection and display, probably around Open Census, Prometheus, having some dashboards, that kind of stuff. So if anyone's interested in that side of things, also more than willing to have people come in. Yeah, we're actively building stuff, and we're really excited about the project. And I'm just sad that I couldn't show a cool demo because Zoom doesn't like me.
Thanks,
Cool.
Mark. Thanks a lot. This is very helpful. So there's a question in the chat window. So if you can drop a link to the YouTube channel that you were talking about, that way at least people can see it secondhand.
Now my screen works again. Okay, I don't know why. All right, cool.
All right, thanks a lot. So let's try to get back on the schedule again. Stephen Augustus, are you back online?
I am back. Apparently there is a, you can't share your screen with Wayland instead of X11. So I will just talk through some of the slides.
Okay, so let's go the SIG PM first.
Yeah, sure. So SIG PM, what do we aim to do? So as SIG PM, the idea of PM is kind of overloaded, right? So we're talking product, we're talking project, and program management, right? So SIG PM focuses on the aspects of product management, such as the qualification and successful management of user requests, and aspects of project and program management, such as the continued improvement of the processes used by the Kubernetes community to maintain the project itself. So who are we? So Aparna from Google, Ihor from CNCF, and Caleb Miles from Google as well are the chairs of SIG PM. We also break SIG PM into a set of sub-projects. So on the program management side and release, we've got Jace from Google. On the product management side, we have myself, Red Hat, and Dustin Kirkland from Google. And the marketing arm is Caitlin Barnard from CNCF and Natasha Woods from CNCF. So what have we done? What have we been doing recently? We recently put up a new charter in Kubernetes, the Kubernetes community repo, which you guys can check out. We've been redefining what the sub-project roles and who the sub-project owners are. So that's still an evolving process. The biggest part is that we have actively started meeting again bi-weekly. So if you guys are interested in meeting with us, it's on the community calendar. So how can you help? We are actively looking for new members in SIG PM. So member representation can be from any company, any person is welcome to join SIG PM. We're actively looking for new members to generally expand that representation across companies, especially for people who are companies who are both frequent Kubernetes contributors and Kubernetes vendors. So how can you help? Continued. We are soliciting for SIG roadmaps. This is going to be big in the next year or so. We want to see SIG roadmaps for Kubernetes 112. I will be sending out an email after the community meeting around that. So as a SIG chair, a technical lead, if you guys can start planning with your SIG, communicating this to SIG PM in advance of us bugging you, and filing and updating issues on the features repo, as well as making sure those issues have the appropriate feature owners. So the feature owner within K features is essentially the project manager for that feature, right? So barring availability of that project manager, will default to reaching out to the SIG chair for updates on those features. So just be aware of that ahead of time. Thanks. So there is a slide deck that you guys can see in the community notes about where exactly to reach us. We are on Slack at Kubernetes PM, links to the Google group, as well as the SIG meetings, the meeting notes, and the recordings. So that is SIG PM.
Thank you. And Stephen, what I can do is I can bring up the slides for SIG Azure, because that's the next SIG that you're representing, and I can be your slide jockey.
Oh, sure. Sounds great.
Let's try that. Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, cool. Go for it.
All right.
I'm going to go into presentation mode.
You can go ahead and hit the next slide. So SIG Azure, what do we do? So this is, SIG Azure is everything around building, deploying, maintaining, supporting Kubernetes on Azure, whether it's Microsoft, Red Hat, who have you, whoever you are. So we want to make sure it's very clear that it's independent of company affiliation and any specific myself, Stephen Augustus from Red Hat. We've got Shupeksha Jalan from Microsoft, as well as Cal and Cole. So what's new? We've, within the last month or so, we've put up a SIG charter within the community repo. We announced the new leadership team. So I'm new, Shupeksha is new as well. Cole and Kyle have been the technical leads for a little bit. So I believe this was announced at KubeCon, but just re-announcing at this point. So we're also beginning the opt-in discussions around SIG cloud provider. So I'm going to be working with Andrew on that, and essentially learning how to bend the knee sooner rather than later on that. And we're also doing Kubernetes 112 planning. So what's cool? What's really cool? OpenShift on Azure is coming. That is going to be a co-managed service between Microsoft and Red Hat. That's coming soon. As soon as we have more details, I'll be giving that to the community. AKS, the Azure Kubernetes service, was announced as GA within the last, I want to say, week and a half. And ACS Engine now supports Cilium and Flannel within the container network interfaces, as well as support for Containerd and Clear containers. So what did we do in Kubernetes 111? So it's huge focus on stability of the currently existing features within Kubernetes Azure. So we've bumped the Azure SDK. We're making a strong focus on ensuring that we only use stable versions of the Azure SDK. Again, exceptions can be granted on a case-by-case basis, but part of the reason for this is we don't actively maintain beta versions for the Azure SDK. So any work done within that has some risk. Not using a stable version. So we're making a hard rule now that we're only going to be using stable versions of the Azure SDK. VM scale sets, which were introduced in 110, we're going GA with those. There's been a lot of work around stabilizing scale sets, as well as disk support. So we have cross-resource group disks, raw disks, different mount options around the Azure disk offerings. We recently announced within, I want to say 3-4 months, maybe more at this point, the load balancer and public IP standard SKUs. So we're able to now leverage those standard SKUs within Kubernetes, and integration with KMS and Azure Key Vault. So what are we planning for 112? This is a generalist, subject to change and all that. So work around Azure availability zones. So the idea of having the availability zones, fault domains, building that into native Azure support on Kubernetes. So things around the network and volume support. Explicit managed service identity, which is so think IAM on AWS, being able to provide that as a service for Kubernetes. So having each pod have its having each node, excuse me, have its own identity within a cluster. So we're going to be actively working on both with SIG Windows as well as SIG Node on Windows CRI configuration. The Azure App Gateway ingress, this may be pushed out to 113, honestly. More work around the cloud controller managers, external cloud providers. So that work that I was mentioning with Andrew will continue to happen. The improvements around CSI. So CSI is active. We've got a few. Sorry if that beeped for you guys. So we've got a few things in the works for CSI, not just as Azure, but on the community, on community scale across all providers. So you'll see more work around Azure Disks and Azure File storage coming in for 112, and the autoscaler work. So everything within the Kubernetes autoscaler repo will be bumped to support AKS, as well as in general bumped to beta. Can keep going. All right, and finally, where can you find us? So again, these for both SIG PM and SIG Azure, the slide decks are available in the community notes. You can find us at SIG Azure on Slack. The Google group links and SIG meetings and recordings and all that good stuff is available to you as well.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to go back to the regular agenda now that we have covered all the items in the agenda. So let's get to the announcement section. The first announcement is please pin your SIG meeting info and agenda doc in your SIG Slack channel. Now that the main calendar is not on kubernetes.io/community meeting, info is less discoverable without these links. The SIG leads and the chairs would have received an email this morning. This is an announcement by Paris, actually. It was sent to K-SIG leads. So new Zoom settings and moderation controls have been discussed over there. So let's keep our meetings safe and transparent. So it's upon each lead and the SIG chair to ensure that. The next announcement is all SIGs. And I think this was added by Gwen. Gwen, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So Carolyn and Nikita did some really great work in figuring out guidelines for help wanted and also good first issue labels. And it was decided in SIG Contrib-X that any issue across the repos that is labeled with good first issue should also come with instructions on where to get started. So for example, what to familiarize yourself first, maybe comparable pull requests or stuff to look at, just generally some guidance so that it's not just like do thing and you have no idea where to get started because you're a new contributor and you might also be too shy to ask for help on the issue. So anything that is labeled with good first issue should just kind of come with some coaching, if that's the right word. And since this is fairly new, we would like to encourage all SIG leads to basically scrub their repos and make sure that anything that has good first issue on it does come with a little bit more instruction than would be usual. Any questions, concerns?
Well, thank you. If you want to reach out to her, she's always on the Slack channel or on SIG Contrib-X. Thanks, Gwen. So I'm going to move on to the last section for the day. Basically, it's about shout-outs. So if you want to post a shout-out, if you appreciate somebody's work, there is a hash shout-outs channel on our Slack. So post it over there. And we captured those shout-outs and list them over there. I checked them before the meeting, and this is the current list. The first one comes from Jason De Tiberis, it's to NeoLit, which is Lubomir Ivanov, for all of the docs contributions for kubeatom v1.11. The second one continues back from Jason. Now this time it is to Jennifer Rondeau for the relentless work on improving our docs and helping bring some more structure to the docs process for SIG cluster lifecycle. Now the third one is from Lubomir Ivanov. Now he's going back to Jason and to Liz Frost and Chuck Ha and Timothy St. Clair and Lucas Klarstrom for the relentless grind through kubeatom 1.11 backlog, potentially making it the best release thus far. The next shout out is from Austin Adams, Ostbot, to Lucas Griglicki. Hopefully I didn't butcher that name too bad. For DevStats, which is awesome. And if you don't know, devstats.kates.io is where you can find those DevStats. The next shout out is from Lai Kapili, Stealthy Box. This is a shout out to Oikiki, which is Kirsten, for being very welcoming to new contributors. The next shout out is from Nikita. Shout out to the whole test infra community for actively using emojis in issues. PRs and Slack, it's pretty subtle, but it goes a long way in making the project and community more friendly and welcoming to new contributors. And she's explicitly CCing Eric Fera, Benjamin Elder, Christoph Blacker, and Steve Kuznetsov. The next shout out comes from Misty Stanley Jones to Jesse Stewart for fixing CSS relating to tab sets in docs. Unfortunately, I can't capture emojis, in a meeting here. So, but you see the sense. The next shout out comes from Eric Ferra to Sen Lu and Benjamin Elder for being ever diligent about reviewing PRs in a timely manner. The next shout out comes from Josh Burkus to Konstantinos for actually beta testing 1.11 and spotting a bug before RC1. The next shout out comes from Kirsten. It's a shout out to Gwen for always generously helping new folks get started contributing to Kate's, and also for completing her first major technical PR. Congrats, Gwen. And the last is an acknowledgement by Gwen, basically saying, oh, no, really, I couldn't have done it without so much help from Christoph Blacker, Cole Wagner, Eric Ferra, and Benjamin Elder. Everyone was super nice and patient and helped me learn. So shout outs to them. I'm so grateful. And the last shout out that I did not put in the shout outs channel is from my personal shout out goes to George and Paris, who have been doing a fantastic job running this community meeting and helping me be the host of the community meeting. So I really give a shout out to them, helping me prepare, taking time out, and working with me. So hopefully the meeting went well and everybody had a good time. Any other last minute comments?
Thanks for having me, and sorry about the technical troubles.
That's all right. No worries. Okay, well, I guess we give you 4 minutes back to your life then. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good time.